So the core of the discussion is that the parachute is not sustainable because right now it's dipping into savings. And when it was introduced, we were way higher, and it was never meant to be sustained this low. So there is talks about either completely canceling the parachute or reducing it, and to prevent us from draining all the funds, because either way, if this goes on, we would run out of funds eventually. So rather have this reduced sooner than later. And this would come in line with also reducing what's demanded from the guilds. So move away from product development, focus only on infrastructure, and funnel everything that's product development through Wax Labs instead of having it under the guild umbrella. This will also mean taking away a lot of the evaluation work from the OIG, because we would just phase out the current guild system, so the current product system, the way it works right now. Essentially, it means we need to cut cost on everything, and there's multiple ideas on how to do that. First of all, we should cut down on infrastructure that is provided, because there is just not that much demand for all the endpoints we provide. We don't need them. And there's also the consideration that given how stable the Wax ecosystem is in the blockchain, how well our block producers perform, we also don't need as many standby seeds as we have right now. There's also something where we could cut in cost, because we just have standby seeds that don't provide real value for what they get, and what they do beyond providing infrastructure that we don't need, they could instead do through Wax Labs. And then also reform and restructure Wax Labs to make it more directly connected to the product development process. So having somebody that's actually taking product ownership as product owner over the development process of labs proposals, so that we know the labs proposals are actually progressing, and we don't lock up funds for something that's then not delivered, or delivered in sub-quality, so that we can interfere earlier in the development process of labs projects and have more control over the whole process.
Yeah, that was thanks. First of all, that was a lot of information. If there's any questions on this or any particular details of this, we can answer. We can talk about everything. So share your questions or ideas or thoughts on that.
I think one of the core questions is, how low could the pay get before it's unsustainable and not viable anymore for BPs on Wax to even run producers, because of cost for both infrastructure, reliable infrastructure, and manpower. And I think that's a question we have to determine before we can decide on where the pay should go, what we do about the parachute and the parachute system.
I guess that depends on what is required of the guilds.
It would be
operators.
Yeah, exactly. So that would probably just scale along with, we could essentially remove all requirements aside of having your producer and probably an RPC node and proper fallbacks and security systems in place. And everything else would essentially become optional as long as we are in this critical state of having too limited pay.
One thing I see that is worth discussing is how to value 24/7 standby and everything like that.
Exactly.
That's very hard to scale down. You can reduce a server, you can reduce an API, but it's hard to scale down manpower at the same rate.
That's exactly why I wanted to introduce the parachute back in the day, because you have to have the manpower. Yes, infrastructure is not that expensive, or you can scale it down, but you have to have manpower, and manpower has to be paid for. And that's something that is often neglected by people doing these calculations.
For our team, I can say that's our number one expense.
Yeah, and it's probably the case for many teams.
So you'd say your guild's biggest cost is on the tech ops side?
It's on the people side.
What are those people doing or contributing to the tech ops side, right?
Well, yeah, but they also have, since they don't have 24/7 where they have to do maintenance or updates or research and things like that. There are also other things they can do with their time when there is dead space, so to speak. But you need to have them around for when things go south. They need to be there as soon as possible. So you need to have them on standby. You need to have them ready.
You don't pay them for 40 hours a week. You pay them to be available when it's needed.
Yeah, and then you can have people work different schedules and things, and you can get a pretty nice deal. But you need more than 2 people. I would say you can get around with 2 people, but then you need 2 people that are ready to have put in a substantial amount of time to make sure that everything is up and running at all times. And that is easy until something goes south. That's the difficult part.
Yeah, and there is also the training.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You need to invest a lot in training and find the right people, which is not easy.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So it just sounds like it would make 100% sense to allocate your guild's budget completely into tech ops and not having to worry about contributions, given the amount of budget we currently have, let's say.
There are dead time. Like you can always do things, but there are periods where you have less urgent things to do, and you can work on building new things, tweaking stuff. There are. I mean, the problem is, how many people do you have? How much time can they spend on each thing? And what do they do when there is a lower demand on their table? I don't know how to explain it better. Because you can do other things as well.
You know, I propose that we're going about this the wrong way. We have this conversation always. It's the same conversation in very different lenses, but it's the same conversation. Why don't we try and determine how much money needs to be, or how many tokens need to be saved? How much value actually needs to be saved in order to make it sustainable going forward? If we can understand that,
the problem is that's something we can't determine because we don't know how low the wax price will fall.
But there is a fixed number which is worked with, right? Which is the chain's inflation. So the chain operates at a 5% yearly inflation. 1% is meant to go into the BP's bucket.
Yeah.
2% is again?
2% are meant to go into the BP's bucket.
That's not what the white paper says. It's what we do out of it.
It's not the white paper. Which white paper? So the original white paper and the token distribution sheet provided by the Wax team at Chain Launch says 2% is going to BPs, 1.2% is going to top 21, and 0.8% is going to standbys. That's what the original part is. The 2% to savings is what we have been doing because we did not, exactly as per systems contracts, because we did not have standby pay as part of the system contracts on mainnet. We had that on testnet. But as per the white paper and the token allocation distribution sheets, 2% are allocated to paying BPs.
At the moment, yes, but it wasn't concepted this way, right?
It was concepted that way.
Why does this graphic here show something else?
I don't see the graphic you're mirroring.
Oh. So this one here, right? This was an updated tokenomics graphic for when the power up system got implemented?
Because that's reflecting how it's currently done, probably, but it's not how it works, or not how it was designed.
I do think that is how it was designed also in the initial white paper.
No, it's not. Both first white paper and the second white paper and the staking and the distribution, the manuals on how the inflation works.
Okay, even if it's 2%, we are spending more than 2% at the moment. And that's what the problem we're facing here, right? We're talking about whatever we allocated in inflation to paying the BPs is exceeding what we get from inflation. So we dip into savings to subsidize the pay for it.
Yeah.
That is still then the main issue, even if it's 2% for BPs. But according to that graphics and to the current block reward, and the top 21 gets paid that 1%. That's how the system, that's what the system contracts would do if there was no OIG in place or something, right?
Yeah.
You would register, you would get your votes, you would get the 5,565 wax a day, I think. And that's it.
So what I'm trying to say is, regardless of what is needed right now for each guild to run, whatever you remove from the pay will mean that they would scale down X amount of effort that they put into it. And look, there's heaps of things that we do. There's so many things. You can do more or you can do none. There's just so much. It'll be like, we could be here for a month just talking about extra effort of things that you do to make it awesome. You know, all of these nodes and slickness of the network doesn't just happen by spinning up an image and things just working. Right? Well, my point is, if we had to reduce the pay, how would we measure the value that we'll be re-enabling back into the network as far as savings go? Like, how would you measure that the savings had helped? You know, so in my mind, I'm thinking there's a reservoir of funding that's being quickly depleted. If we had to slow down that depletion of that reservoir, how much would we want to slow it down in order to say that we were successful? You know, regardless of, you know, what guilds are spending their effort on. You know what I mean? It's like a finite thing that can be separated from whatever anybody's doing. We've got X amount of funding available and we want to spend less. So, you know,
I think what we have to do is, as a first step, is prevent the parachute from exceeding the 2% inflation. Because that's where shit hits the fan, because it's dipping into the savings and make us unsustainable.
That sounds that sounds plausible and like a good idea.
So originally, when I designed the parachute, it was to dynamically adjust the inflation, so that it would increase the inflation when the price is too low and decrease the inflation when the price is high enough, so that it would go both ways and it would justify the decrease in pay once the wax price exceeds like 8 to 16 cents, somewhat in that range. So it was essentially a boon to the guilds to say, yeah, we're taking away some of your pay when the price is high, as it was in 2021 and 2022. But at the same time, we cover your asses when the price is too low and you would otherwise not be able to sustain your business. That was the whole idea behind the parachute. And then we said, yeah, let's not do that. We don't want to touch the inflation. So we just use the savings instead. So, and then when we introduced that was around, I think, 10 cents. We said we have to revisit that if the price of wax goes too low, because it would otherwise not be sustainable. The problem I now see is, even if we go down to 2% parachute, so cap the parachute at this 2% inflation, it would probably not really solve or manage its use case. It would not be that much or enough to sustain the operations as it stands while we have top 21 guilds and 15 standby guilds. That's why I'm proposing to reduce the seats of standby guilds on who is getting parachute in the first place, because we simply don't need to have 15 standby guilds.
Do standby guilds need parachute at all is another question. I mean, it sucks to jump down from 21 to 22. It will hurt those that are around there and are running a big operation. But the further down you go, the less operation they are required to have. They don't need 24/7 and everything like that.
Yeah, that's the thing here. I don't think everybody in the standbys needs parachute. But I also do think that if we go down sub 1 cent, then not having a parachute will kill standbys. Probably. At least if they are in the top performing bracket of the standbys. So that's why I would say we include like the top 4 or top 6 standbys in the parachute system, and everybody below that is not a standby but a runner-up. They don't get parachute, maybe not even full standby pay. Just drastically reduce the seats, so we need to determine how many standbys do we actually need. What happens if there is a major outage at one data center like Hetzner? How many seats do we need to ensure the same is secure and keeps operating?
I'm also dropping one other thing. Ultra is running with 7 producers, no standby.
That's a different thing. That's something we could consider if we
I'm not saying that's the way, I'm just saying it works.
Yeah, I know it works, because the WAX team was doing something
that are on top of everything at all times.
Yeah, we did the same in the beginning of WAX. I mean, in the beginning of WAX, WAX was running most of the validators themselves, and we could also consider that we say, yeah, we have 21 seats, so we just cut it down to 7 validators, each with 3 keys, taking on 3 rounds in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the best idea. I'm just pushing it as a...
It's something that could be done to save on, especially on labor cost, because you would not need that many people anymore to oversee all that. But I don't think it's the best case scenario, and I think it's probably more viable to try to get people away from having everything on Hetzner and OVH by incentivizing to get away from that, have the strongly reduced parachute that is below the inflation we have to spend, and then also cut down on excess hardware like infrastructure we don't need. We don't need 16 full Hyperions, we probably need 1 or 2. We don't need to have 15 standby guilds when at max usually 1 guild drops out, maybe 2. So this is all costs that could be cut down to make the stuff we actually need sustainable within the 2% inflation we have.
Well, like I started my my stand in there was we have this conversation often, right? And we don't ever progress off phase 1. We keep having the same conversation until, I suppose, at some point there's no funding left, and then we can't even know what we'll be having conversations. Why don't we take some low-hanging fruit and actually make some changes? You know, we wouldn't want to drastically go and just implement 10 different things. Why don't we decide on a few saving changes that we can do now? Like, how would you even proceed from this conversation? Is this a WAX organization?
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Is this a WAX conversation, i.e. with the WAX organization?
Yeah, we are talking with the WAX team about these changes and have been for a month now. And I'm currently drafting a proposal with potential changes and also timeline on how to get there. So in what order we are starting to make adjustments. We always started to make adjustments within the OIG and how we evaluate products. So we started to decrease product points across the board when we are currently re-evaluating stuff that is not essential.
Okay. All right. So we keep, like I said, we keep having the same conversation. What do you need in order to, because there's been a lot of great ideas over the last 6 months we've been speaking about this. It's like,
we haven't really, we haven't spoken that much about the parachute at all, I think, or about reducing the standby seats or adjusting the pay. I think that was not what we have been talking about. Is reducing pay and reducing pressure on guilds by taking away full Hyperion and reducing the infrastructure requirements. So this is just the second discussion that's on top of that. That is. Has the same basis that we need to reduce costs. But the first discussion was we want to reduce the cost for the guilds to make them more sustainable. But now we, on the other hand, have the Wax team wanting to cut down on actual spending of the chain because we have to due to the current dip into the savings.
Okay, and I get that, and I understand that. But what I'm trying to figure out is how you're going to get constructive feedback from us to put that into some kind of proposal that wouldn't then have us involved, or it would then have us involved? Because we can
I think the discussion we are currently having is what I will put into the proposal I present to the Wax team.
Sounds like
the OIG presents to the Wax team.
Sounds good to me.
So
sounds like a good proposal.
We have to talk about this. I have to get feedback, what you think about it, and then ultimately the Wax team has to decide which direction they want to go.
Okay.
So
maybe it'll be
one thing is we don't fully know what the Wax team wants to achieve.
Yes.
It's what their end goal is. We just know they want to cut down on spending.
Yes,
so
and I can understand that.
And then we need to work something out and present to them that they then like or don't like. Then we can adjust further from there. But for that, we need to have an impression and the sentiment from the guilds, what they think, where we should go, because we don't want to just, I personally don't want to just step over the guilds and do whatever I think is right if it doesn't align with the guild's interest. I think we as OIG are still representing the guilds to some extent and the interest of the guilds and the community.
Okay, so what do you need in order to put together your proposal? I mean, perhaps it would be simpler if you created your frame proposal and people commented on it. Because when we have these conversations, they're not constructive enough. I don't think, unless you think this is constructive enough for you to get the feedback that you need. You know,
it gives the first impression because we didn't have these discussions yet because this is just starting. So
I think everything that we've said. Has got a good ground, right? There's definitely wins all over there, and you can just start taking away functionality until you have small little guilds that just do block production. You can get that far, but that's what I'm saying. Just start at the beginning. That the whole not so many Hyperions. Maybe then reduce the parachutes for the lower end standby guild. Then maybe reduce the pay for the lower end standby guilds and kind of work your way up. I still think we need standbys, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think that as well.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, all of these things, all these cost reduction mechanisms are good ideas to reduce costs, and they start at 0 and go to 100. So maybe put some of the ones that have been discussed already into some kind of frame. We can comment on it, take it to Wax and see what it is that they think will be successful. That's just my opinion.
Do you have any calculations on how much inflation is used now and what the effect will be to reduce standbys to 4 or whatever the suggestion was?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, do you have any calculations now on the inflation that is used currently and the effect that reducing standby to the proposed level is?
I don't. I have a table I'm working on. I have an Excel spreadsheet I'm working on that is using the new calculations and adjustment of the structure, but it's not fully done yet.
Cool.
But I can share it with you when the calculations are final.
Yeah, that's lovely.
That'd be fantastic.
No point in doing it before, it will only be wrong numbers.
So in the end, it would be like it caps out at current at around 2.5k. So with the parachute, I think we would go down at 1 cent to 2.5k in guild pay for top 21. So I think that's somewhere in that region, 2.5 to 3k or something, with the reduced seats and keeping the parachute, but limiting it to the cap of 2% inflation. And I'm trying to refine the model a bit more because this currently leaves unused overhead. So, yeah.
But all of this is based on the current on the assumption that the current guild roster reviewing will remain the same.
What do you mean?
Yeah, talking about the inflation numbers.
Okay.
And factoring in how you pay top 21 and how you pay standby and stuff like that. That's how the OIG system is currently designed to work and operate. But I'm not sure if that's what we desire here. Overall,
I still don't know what exactly you mean with that.
Yeah, we've talked about more drastic changes.
Yes, of course. That would
be a two-track system for guilds.
No, it would essentially not be a two-track system. It would be a one-track system that focuses mainly on infrastructure and emergency measures, and everything else the second track would be Wax Labs.
So it's a two-track system.
So it's a two-track system by not being a two-track system, because it would just be decoupled, and it's an entirely own system that is decoupled from the OIG, because the OIG would not be maintaining Wax Lab, probably not be maintaining Wax Labs, because
why not?
Because I don't think we need 3 people on Wax Labs, because we would need more specialized individuals.
We have to do project management and follow up on the project. Something that has not been done.
Yes. That could be done by a full-time job. That could be done by IGs or previous IGs or other people. I don't think this has to be part of the OIG job. Actually, I think
But it could be. That's actually the idea. I think that it should evolve to.
It's essentially the same work.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not. At least in my mind, it's not the same work, because we as IGs, we have been evaluating what has been done, but I think Wax Labs should move into a system where we're actively involved in the development of the projects that are developed.
Exactly.
There.
That's more a project management. It's quite different, but it's
not
a job that we have
product management, but product ownership. So we have these product owner concept where we're essentially the ones giving, like the contractors. So somebody from the Wax team or from the OIG would be like a contractor, and then is working with this external team and is giving direct feedback on what is development as it's developed. So like whoever is getting a grant from the Wax team would have these sprints, and then would coordinate directly with whoever is in charge or responsible for whatever is done.
Exactly.
So. But this should, in my opinion, could be a different umbrella that can overlap with the OIG, but doesn't have to be the OIG.
I wouldn't want to name it OIG, though.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of uncertainties right now.
Yeah, because in the end, we are not the ones making the decisions.
The OIG is going to change.
Yeah, of course.
It's not what it is right now.
If we stop evaluating,
it's going to change. Whatever it will be, we might have different opinions, but the fact is that it's not going to be the same as it is right now. That's a reality.
That's, clear. It couldn't be, because if we want to move away from product development and product evaluations, it of course has to change, because that's 80% of our work. And I think what's then being on the other track that's going through labs is also different work than what we have been doing as IGs. It has some overlap, because we're also evaluating efforts, but it's still a completely different job, because it's more a project management, project ownership thing. And that's it, to me, in my opinion, that's a different discussion that has nothing to do with, at least at first, it has nothing to do with the changes we want or have to implement for the guild pay.
I don't think it's how it works in any other RFP system that the reviewer of a RFP system and the one advising and mentoring is doing like project management 8 hours a week for a project that applied for a grant on that
Exactly.
platform.
That's why I said we shouldn't do project management. I think it's more of project ownership. So you discuss what is delivered. You're product owner, not project manager. The teams need to have their own project management because they need to coordinate their own team. And this would also be out of scope, I think. So definitely not project management. Just Joseph called it product management. But it's, in my opinion, it's not. It's product ownership. I don't know if the role is called the same in English. In Germany, we call it product owner.
Yeah, I've been a product owner before joining WAX. And actually, before joining the VP work, I was a product owner for a few years. But it was just an evolution of my product management. I ended up doing product ownership and the product owner.
But product owner is a different scope.
It is. But for me, it's an evolution. But maybe because I did it in the past, it doesn't seem like something odd or weird to me, right? That's why I mentioned.
Yeah. As said, what left to me is a different discussion. It's just something we have to refine or should refine if we take away the whole product side from the guild evaluations. And I still think there is still critical stuff that we should factor in. I mean, we have guilds that beyond being a guild and doing product development have things that are crucial for the chain and should, in my opinion, still influence who is top 21 and who isn't. There's, yeah. So
that's why there need essentially to be two different RFP systems. One is ecosystem support and the one is consumer goods funding.
Include now the pay of the OAG is directly related to the standby pay. So as we cut the standby pay, obviously this also cuts the pay of the OAG drastically. So that's out of question anyway. This counts naturally. Yes, and the OIGs get parachute.
Lisa, what's up?
Could I suggest that it would be a good time to propose, while proposing changes, that a formation committee is created to set up the WAX Foundation? I think a group of people that would be willing to understand that and then even help to raise some of the initial money, because I think there are some sources for donations that could help build new revenue streams for the blog producers and creators. So it's a bit of a project and takes some effort and faith, of course, but might be a good time to just start looking at that and have a formation committee put together a plan.
Yeah.
My background's in fundraising, so I'm able to help with that.
Yeah, bring all the funds, please.
I think it's possible. I've been noticing recently, I think there are some sources. You all may have heard a lot of grants and such are being cut in the United States, but that actually shouldn't be a deterrent. If anything, I think there will be more available for good projects, like the foundations and stuff will step forward. So we'll have an opportunity to hear about them and get more involved. And I think some of the technology companies probably would want to be involved, but you know, it's an effort. It's a long-term effort, so it might take a while. But to have a new revenue source in addition to Wax and Wax, you know, Wax Labs would probably be really helpful, and also could help support things like business development. I was seeing what Nick said about bringing the brands and the sports teams in, and you know, that people could be hired to do that at the foundation, for example. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but that could be a model, is to support that kind of thing. And so in addition to bringing in revenue, it could also help promote growth in more traditional ways.
Yeah, hard to sell.
Sorry, what did you say? I missed that.
I said it's hard to sell.
What, the foundation? Or asking for money?
That people bringing capital onto Wax into a foundation.
Oh, I don't think it's hard. I think it's just complicated. I think it's actually
That makes
a
it
great
hard.
value. I think the hardest thing would probably be like getting it going and getting everyone on the same page. But then once it's set up and you have your standard proposals, you customize for people, it's, you know, about reaching out to grant makers, building relationships, reaching out to brands. It just becomes kind of more straightforward. Like what you all have been doing is innovative and new and amazing, and figured out how to fund it. Like it's truly groundbreaking, but there's a lot easier ways to get money, which could be explored. So, but that's what I mean. Like it kind of has to be like people who have some sense of that and are somewhat brave and willing to do that. But I think it's possible, and I'm quite sure that we could raise money.
Henrik is raising his hand.
Yeah, it was about the raising money idea. I'm a little bit unsure about why it needs to be a foundation and not just, for example, if you create some sort of project in the ecosystem and then raise some money for that. Because any project could in reality raise some money, I guess, or find some VC funding or something, but it also needs to make sense. Like currently, I guess the biggest issue in the ecosystem is that there isn't really that much remaining community. There's not that much demand for anything. It's hard to figure out even what to build or how to onboard anybody else, and who to reach out to, or what to sell or whatever. But I think we need to sort of, first of all, maybe narrow down a little bit, or get working together on onboarding like the same audience, the same it's a little bit complicated. I'm not entirely sure how to do this on like a network wide scale, but I think we can start the marketing process already now, before that we go below 1 cent, for example. I mean, it doesn't get easier.
I may repeat that, but we don't own any funds. So if we were to start a marketing initiative, would be through Wax Labs, Labs proposal. But we do have a lot of resources and building power and APIs and stuff like that. That's what we can use to drive some activity on Wax. The other thing, you would always need to convince the labs reviewers to sponsor your initiative.
I would suggest the foundation is funded with a $1 grant to show support, and that there's support shown by the OIG, but the OIG doesn't do it, and that the WAX team shows support, that everyone's sort of involved and willing and has representatives perhaps on the board, something like that. But then we could go to community members and ask for like early grants to get started and start that way. The reason to do a foundation is twofold. For one, Lucas was just talking about it again while I saw your comment. And he was talking about setting up the foundation, planning to hand over some of the keys, et cetera. But it's also to be able to accept money that the donors don't have to pay taxes on, and to do partnerships through that entity. So it doesn't have to do everything, or, but it can do certain things, such as accepting money and building accounts that it stores that money in.
Couldn't you do the same with a non-profit project in the ecosystem, or much of the similar things?
I would hope we would have many and support that. That would be fantastic. I think the foundation in Lucas's mind in part is to be able to take over some of the decentralization and over time. And that's a great reason and message to give to potential donors. I think a lot of people support that. And I think a lot of entities want to get involved in that, grow it, watch it, support it, have brand affiliation. I personally think WAX is a totally undervalued asset and ecosystem. It's the absolute best for learning and experimenting on the blockchain. It's probably the safest for that as well. So I think it's just like this gem sitting there waiting, and it hasn't been destroyed, right? It hasn't been exploited like many of them. So yeah, no, Lucas was talking about it on the call. He was. Anyway, food for thought. And by the way, thank you all for everything you're doing.
I quickly need to remember what I'm thinking. Going back to what Ricardina said, it doesn't need to be even funding from WAX Labs or from WAX or from OAG or from the guilds. It could also just be funding from the community. Make it a community mission to have this project that raises some funds via some NFT drops, whatever it is, and then uses those funds in the marketing. I mean, there could be a lot of ways to do it, and having some support from, for example, a few guilds would greatly improve the odds for those projects succeeding, if there would be, especially if there would be a few more of them starting to begin, which could also happen if there was seen to be a little bit more support from the ecosystem, I think, from the new creators or people coming in to build. And going further to what Lisa said, then I'm still not sure that it needs to be a foundation. I'm a little bit unsure why it couldn't just be a community project.
I think the point is to bring money into the community projects. And so the foundations and organizations that give grants, for example, we have here in every community an art council, and we also have them at the state level and the federal level. And, God, collectively, they probably give away hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. It's a lot of money. So that's a perfect example of where they would only, the individuals can apply for grants, but organizations can apply for large grants to give to individuals. So that's a case where you need a nonprofit to accept those funds to distribute them. Basically, a nonprofit here anyway is a company that just has a designation as nonprofit, so it doesn't have to pay taxes on those funds. If it sells t-shirts, it has to pay taxes, but that allows those grants to come in. Like if you see on PBS at the end, sponsored by this foundation, that foundation, they all have to give to nonprofits.
Yeah, so any other talking point that was raised in the message today we want to get into? Any
No one
more details?
On Thursday,
whole-
we talk about what is marketing. It's a bold move, but I agree.
Yeah, on the whole savings side of things, then
Yeah.
Well, now I'm a little bit confused also with all the changes that might be discussed, but I was a little bit wondering about that possibility of guilds getting the reward for a project or funding both via Wax Labs and then getting points for it afterwards. Shouldn't it be like one of the other?
That's not relevant anymore if
Yep,
products is not being rated soon.
Exactly. So what we did initially was that we did not grant points for the development if it was done through Wax Labs, but just for the maintenance and release after, usually, unless it was something where we felt this was incentivized, that it was something we wanted to have and wanted to incentivize guilds to do it. So that in these cases, we sometimes said, yeah, we're doing both. So because we think this is crucial, like, for example, specific guides or tooling, then we say, this is important and this is so important that we want to incentivize somebody to do it and grant points for it, even if he's being paid to do it through Wax Labs.
Yeah, okay. I understand. It just seems a little bit, yeah, I don't know.
But we did have many discussions on this, and we never were all on the same page. So there's the decision on that is not unanimous.
Yeah, next.
When do we think we will get any clarity on this?
I don't know. We have our next call with the Wax team tomorrow, and at some point they will make a decision and decide what route they want to take. In the end, it's up to the Wax team to decide. We can just give input and say what we think is the best for the guilds and the community, but in the end, the Wax team has to decide, and they will also determine the timeline.
The numbers you're working on, when do you think they will be ready enough?
Hopefully sometime today or tomorrow.
Okay, so at least before next week.
Yes. But this is just my calculation. I don't know what the Wax team makes of it. It could be that they want to cut down the total inflation further, or I don't know. I'm basing off all my calculations on the distribution sheet you shared earlier up above. But it's also still not quite like this because this was never implemented this way. So how it was implemented in the system contracts originally, after this was shared, was that only 1% went into staking rewards, not the full 2%, and also only 1% went into top 21, into the top 21 bucket. So initially, for the most time, entirety of 3% went into savings. And because 1% of the staking reward allocation was meant to be used in a different mechanic that was never implemented. So later on, this was adjusted and also distributed to staking rewards. And then for some reason, top 21 were only paid 1% inflation instead of the 1.2%. I don't know what the reasoning or thought behind was. It was never written down anywhere. So, but when we realized that, we said, okay, it makes sense to just do 1% top 21 and 1% standby because we have 36 standbys, and this would reduce the gap between top 21 and standby. So that's why we have the 2%. But yeah. Either way, neither what's currently written down nor what is there is essentially how it's meant to be or how it is implemented. So we need to discuss where we want to be. I think that's the whole thing, and that we don't know. Maybe Tommy has more info. But yeah, in the end, only the Wax team knows what they want to do.
Thanks for the information.
All right.
I have a question on a different topic.
Yeah, go ahead.
We talked, I don't know if it was 1, 2, or 3 weeks ago, about reforming Wax Labs, how that works, how that is presented and everything. Is that something that has been spoken with the Wax team? Any progress on that, or is same state as before?
I think we owe to deliver a concept for Wax Labs and how we can improve the funding on Wax Labs, detailed criteria, how the review process is done, have a more regular reviewing process. And that's one big chunk that has been missing, has been criticized a lot. If people only knew what would be needed here on Wax, which kind of products they should build, we would probably also get more proposals that we like and that we like to fund. But yeah, the labs as it is right now, it needs a huge overhaul, and I view it as a chance to just think about, for example, phasing out the contributions which we have on the contribution sheet into a new, like Wax Labs, or an alternative for ecosystem support. And then getting the critical infrastructure projects on Wax, wallets, block explorers, APIs, history solutions, I don't know what else, funded through Wax Labs in the long term. So in my mind, it doesn't make sense to only reform the one or the other. Talking about the guild roster and an RFP system on Wax, I do feel like this goes hand in hand. Because ultimately, that was a good perk of the guild roster. It enabled the funding for a lot of good products on Wax, right? It kept funding the maintenance cost of those products. We received a lot of goodwill from some Antelope products, like Greymass, for example. They never did the grant on labs. They always just relied on the guild roster. That's some uncertainty we need to clarify going forward. How do we keep getting innovative and critical products on Wax funded in the future?
Yeah, 2.5k, if it goes down there, there's not much a team can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I don't think that's the way to operate.
Looked at my number. I have to double check if the math is right, but I think it's actually 5k, not 2.5.
What is 5k? Sorry, I couldn't follow that one.
The pay might be 5k at 1 cent for top 21 if we keep the parachute, but just cap it at 2%. But I have to look into that.
Okay.
No, actually, wait. It should not exceed it should not exceed 3k. Yeah, I have to run the numbers. But yeah, one way or another, there's just not much you can do in terms of product development on that budget.
No, it's not enough for hardware and one person.
Yeah, exactly. Not even that. So that's
That's terrible. Okay, what else? Any other detail we want to talk about? Anything that is unclear to anyone here, and we can maybe clarify?
I think we're all keen to hear what the Wax team, where their headspace is on it. You know, what they're expecting, what kind of savings they're expecting, and how that affects. I mean, once we understand where their headspace is, then we'll probably have a better understanding about how things will go. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely needs to be communicated.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say, are there any other questions, everybody's a little bit quiet because we're all like, oh man, what is this going to mean? You know?
Yeah, it's a lot of discussions around theories right now. It needs some substance.
Absolutely.
It's good to have these discussions, though.
That's why we're meeting.
yeah.
But yeah, the Wax team will need to communicate more about that, and then we can extend this discussion, right? Okay, we are an hour in. It's anyways not the last time we're meeting. We're gonna meet again next week. Thursday, we're meeting for one or two proposals. We also are theming the Thursday roundtable around Twitch because we want to look into creative Twitch integrations for Wax. There's a proposal which seeks funding, and it will integrate a lot of the functionality on Wax into Twitch for royalty and user engagement. That's quite interesting. If you happen to be active on Twitch or have seen any cool integrations, please join on Thursday. And yeah, let's get some feedback back to the proposal.
Have Twitch changed their... Oh, that's probably Thursday, but their view on crypto and NFTs? They had some issues with integrating those things.
They still don't allow it. And the main problem is you don't get your game listed on as a category on Twitch. That's what we learned last week on Thursday. That's the main issue. You would need to get your game listed as a category to be able to do some funky stuff on there. But yeah, let's. So this person has been building that integration already, and if you're curious to know a lot more about Twitch, I think it's the right place on Thursday.
Cool.
All right. That's a good idea, Nick. It's always so hard to have a good discussion with many people, but still, everyone should join. All right, let's conclude for today. Thanks everyone, and thanks for sharing your minds and your opinions too. And yeah, we're meeting next week. we can pick up this discussion then.
All right.
All right.
Nice,
Hope you
everyone.
all have
Oh,
a happy Tuesday.